It's May 1st, 2013. This is the Platting Board, and the meeting will come to order at 6:30 p.m. The first order of business is roll call.
Lendl Story,
Here.
Steve Abel,
Here.
Ken Fuller,
Here.
Daniel Young,
Present.
Brent Cole, Anthony Cange,
Present.
Trevor Edmondson,
Here.
Clayton Walker,
Present.
Christina Enitz.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum for tonight. And do we have any agenda changes or postponements? We have none. Okay, the next order of business is approval of the minutes and action summaries. May I have a motion directing us to approve the minutes and the action summaries? Oh, excuse me, action summaries only. Mr. Cange and Mr. Walker seconds. Is there any objection? Hearing and seeing none. This motion carries, and the action summaries are approved. Okay. For tonight, are there any disclosures? You guys are doing great. Do you have a disclosure? I have two. In the case S11988-1 Whisperwood West subdivision, lots 1 through 22, my firm works with the petitioner and works on joint projects with the petitioner's representative. I have personally worked on this property for the benefit of the petitioner, and I declare a conflict of interest and ask to be excused from presiding over this matter tonight. May I have a positive motion directing me to participate, please? Mr. Story and Mr. Fuller seconds. Is there, well, we have to vote. So is there any discussion? Then we vote. A positive motion directs me to participate. A negative vote directs me to be recused. And the motion fails, I will recuse myself. In the case S11989-1 Woodhaven Subdivision Edition 3, lots 1 through 13, tracts A and B, my firm has business dealings with the petitioner on other matters. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board tonight. I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of this board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interest will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. Do we need to vote? May I have a positive motion directing me to participate, please? Mr. Cange and Mr. Fuller seconds. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? The motion passes. I will participate. Thank you. So we are... For the record, Mr. Cole has arrived. It's 6:35. Thank you. And also for the record, we have short plats that we have for April 8th and April 15th that we have in our packet. Mr. Cole, do you have any disclosures? Oh, please go forward.
I have one. Let's see. I believe this is the matter of S. Let me make sure I do this right. In the matter of S11988-1 Whisperwood West Subdivision, lots 1 through 22. Petitioner, as I understand it, is Holdquist Homes, Inc. And I have represented Mr. Holdquist, and I maybe have represented a company associated with Holdquist Homes. It was probably 6 to 8 years ago. I've not had any contact with him since that time. I do not believe that it would affect, I don't have any personal interest in this matter. I don't have any financial dealings with him. But, and I don't think that it would affect my ability to be fair and impartial in this, but I do think I should disclose it.
I agree. Thank you. May I have a positive motion directing Mr. Cole to participate tonight, please? Mr. Kange and Mr. Walker seconds. Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none. Mr. Cole, you're directed to participate. Thank you. Is there any other disclosures? The procedure by which the public may speak to the Platting Board at its meeting is, after the staff presentation is complete on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission rules and procedures. Petitioners, including all his or her representatives, have 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. And I want to be clear on what this means. If at the beginning you wish to set time aside for rebuttal, we will stop you and allow you to have that time for rebuttal. If you don't reserve the time and you finish early, you still get the time for rebuttal. So it's just if you want to make certain that you have that time. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., have 5 minutes. Individuals have 3 minutes for testimony. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the board. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at scheduled public hearings shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or change circumstances per AMC 21.11.503 or an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. The first item of new business is case S11987-1, Denali, Alaska Federal Credit Union Subdivision Plat, and they are asking for a postponement. And I would like to ask or request a motion to postpone this case. Mr. Walker and Mr. Kane seconds. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, this motion passes and the case is postponed. You have to leave. For this next case, I'm recused, so I'm going to leave the room, and Mr. Story will take over the chair. Should I leave this?
The next case on the agenda is S11988-1, Whisperwood West Subdivision. Can we have the staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to subdivide one tract into 22 lots with a request to vacate and relocate a highway screening easement and a T&E easement located on the north property boundary. The petition site is a 5-acre site located on the north side of Whisperwood Park Drive, south of the Glen Highway, between Boniface Parkway and Turpin Street. The site is zoned R4. The surrounding area is zoned R3 and R4 and is developed with multifamily and duplex-style developments. All proposed lots within this subdivision meet the dimensional subdivision and zoning requirements. The proposed subdivision includes a 60-foot right-of-way, dedication for a squint in a circle. A proposed condition of approval requires that the applicant enter into a subdivision agreement for the construction of that right-of-way. Lots 2 and 3 will have direct access on the Whisperwood Park Drive. Whisperwood Park Drive functions as a collector for this developing area. The current subdivision standards state that residential lots shall not have direct access onto streets of collector classification or greater. However, Whisperwood Park Drive is not designated on the official streets and highways plan as a collector, and therefore the department is not recommending restricting access to Whisperwood Park Drive for those 2 lots. Policy 54 of the Anchorage 2020 plan states that we must provide pedestrian and trail connections within and between residential subdivisions in new plats, including replats. The applicant states that the subdivision could potentially contain 132 dwelling units. The property directly to the east has several multifamily structures. Especially considering that this is a high-density development area, the department recommends a condition of approval to dedicate 2 right-of-way, a 10-foot wide pedestrian path between lots 17 and 18, and a condition of approval to construct a 6-foot wide asphalt path from Squinton Circle to MacArthur Place. There's also a request to vacate and relocate a couple of easements through this plat. As I stated, the applicant is proposing to vacate and relocate those easements. The overhead power lines are currently located within the existing highway screening easement. Proposed vacation and relocation will place the existing power lines in the proposed T&E easement. The highway screening will be between the power lines and the Glen Highway. Per the screening landscape requirements of AMC 2145-125, the applicant has requested that the screening easement be reduced to 20 feet by also including a 7-foot-high decorative wood fence. A proposed condition of approval requires that a plat note be added stating the need for the Urban Design Commission to review the highway screening as required in AMC 2145-130. An application for UDC approval of the highway screening has already been submitted. The department finds that the proposed plat meets all subdivision and design improvement standards of AMC 2180 and 2185, subject to the proposed conditions of approval. The vacation request has been reviewed in accordance with AMC 2115-130. All impacted utility companies have no objection to the vacation with modification. The relocated highway screening easement meets the standards of AMC 2145. And with that being said, staff would like to recommend approval of this plat and easement vacation and relocation subject to the conditions located on pages 7, 8, and 9 of your staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Thank you. As this meeting is now open for public hearing, can we have the petitioner's presentation, please? State and spell your name for the record.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Tom Dreher, and I'm with S4 Group. I represent the petitioner tonight, Holtquist Homes. And with me tonight, we have Mr. Craig Van Sickle with Holtquist Homes to answer any questions you may have of the property owner. And also Mr. Dave Grenier with Tried Engineering is here to answer any engineering questions you may have. We've gone through a pre-application meeting conference, and I think we had a post-app on this one here too, and have worked out almost all the little kinks and whatnot, so it's a pretty boring case here tonight, pretty simple subdivision. And with that, I'll make myself available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the petitioner? Thank you.
Thank you.
The meeting is now open for public testimony. Is there any individuals in the audience that would like to testify tonight? Not seeing any. Would you like any time for rebuttal? All right, we'll now close the public hearing, and the matter now rests with the board. Can I have a positive motion? Mr. Kange.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In case S11988-1, Whisperwood West Subdivision, I move to approve the vacation of the 30-foot highway screening easement and approve the 20-foot T&E easement adjacent to the north property boundary, subject to the conditions 1 and 2. We need two separate motions here. Can I? Okay.
Mr. Kange, could you repeat that motion, please?
I move to approve the vacation of the 30-foot highway screening easement and the 20-foot T&E easement adjacent to the north property boundary, subject to conditions 1 and 2 as outlined in our packet, page 7.
Thank you. Mr. Walker seconds. Mr. Kange, can you speak to your motion?
Thank you. It appears that the approval of this vacation and easement comply with municipal codes and standards and are supported based on information provided by staff and in our staff packet as well. I tend to vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to the motion or provide additional findings? Mr. Edmondson.
I'd just add that the vacations also supported by the utility companies that would be affected by this as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this motion or add additional findings?
I believe that the request meets the requirements of AMC 2145-125 and allows the combined easement to be 20-foot wide so long as there's a 7-foot fence. That's what they've asked for, and it meets the standard.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Can we have a positive motion for item B? Mr. Kange.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, in case S11988-1 Whisperwood West subdivision, I move to approve the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions, looks like 1 through 9, outlined on pages 7 through 9 in our packet.
Thank you. Ms. Enoch seconds. Mr. Kange, can you speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I tend to vote in favor of this approval of the plat. It appears based on the information provided in our staff packet and testimony of the petitioner's representative that these items wouldn't be an issue. The testimony of the petitioner's representative and the I guess as just reading through this, seeing no comments from the community council, it appears that, and no public testimony, it appears that no one seems to have a major issue with this. It seems to comply with all code and municipal standards, so I tend to vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Kange. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the motion? Is there any further discussion? Are there any objections? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the Board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes final appealable decision within 20 days of the final appealable decision. An interested party must file with the municipal clerk either A, a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or B, an appeal of the Board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. We'll take a short break while Mr. Young comes back.
The next case is S11989-1, Woodhaven Subdivision, Addition 3. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary plat for subdivision of one tract of land into 13 lots and 2 tracts of land with a variance from AMC 2180-300D design standards lot dimensions. The width of a lot shall be at least 1/3 of the depth of the lot. This plat is also proposed as a cluster housing development governed by AMC 2150-210. The petition site is zoned R6, Suburban Residential District. This site is being, as I said before, developed as a cluster housing development governed under AMC 2150-210. Cluster housing developments in the R6 zoning district require a minimum site area of 5 acres. In addition, the maximum dwelling units per acre may not exceed 0.8. Building setbacks for this development are as follows. The front yard is 25 feet, side yard is 10 feet, rear yard is 20 feet. Topography generally slopes away from Elmore Road in the northeast section of the subdivision toward Clio Avenue in the southwest section of the subdivision. Class C wetlands are found primarily in lower lying areas of proposed tracts A and B. Access is via Elmore Road, which is located east of the petition site. Proposed Marcel Circle will be a publicly dedicated 60-foot wide right-of-way built with a 20-foot wide strip paved surface and 2-foot wide shoulders on both sides. The non-motorized transportation coordinator is requiring a 10-foot wide pedestrian walkway constructed to connect from Marcel Circle to Clio Avenue for subdivision residents to reach Huffman Elementary to the south. While the pedestrian walkway could be dedicated as an easement, staff feels that it would be more appropriate to modify the plat to extend Tract B northward along the east property boundaries of lots 10 and 11 and provide the walkway within this tract. This will ensure that the walkway is under the control and maintenance of the homeowners association. The lots will be developed with on-site well and septic systems. This is a cluster housing development and which is governed under the standards established by AMC 2150-210. Cluster housing is intended to provide a development option particularly suited to tracts of land that include marginal areas. Marginal areas include wetlands, steep slopes, or creeks. Proposed development clusters the dwelling units on the more developable portions of the property and preserves the more steeply sloped portions and critical wetlands as undisturbed open space. The municipality provides for an alternative development technique to achieve community goals such as the open space preservation of water quality, reduction of erosion, and enhancement of sediment control. The proposed development is within the intent of the cluster housing development. I'm going to go through the standards for the cluster housing. AMC 2150-210C, only one principal structure is allowed per lot. This subdivision is proposed for 13 single-family detached dwelling units, so we find that this standard is met. Permitted density in the R6 district is 0.8 dwelling units per acre. Proposed density is approximately 0.65 dwelling units per acre, so this standard is met. Minimum size of the cluster plat in the R6 district is 5 acres, and this is met. AMC 2150-210D, this section addresses attached housing units in the R1 and R1A and does not apply to this subdivision. AMC 2150-210E, maximum lot coverage is 40%. This standard will be reviewed during the building permit process. 210F, minimum yard requirements, front yard 25 feet, side yard 10 feet, and rear yard 20 feet. This standard, again, will be met during the building permit process. 210G, common open space. At least 30% of the site shall be a common open space as defined under AMC 2135. Environmentally sensitive features may be included in the computation of open space. The petitioner has provided 6.07 acres as being dedicated to common open space. This equates to 32.6% of the site, so staff finds this standard to be met. Common usable open space. Of the common usable open space, at least 600 square feet per dwelling unit shall be provided as common usable open space within the cluster subdivision that is created on lots of less than 6,000 square feet. Since this subdivision has no lots under 6,000 square feet, this standard does not apply, and staff finds that standard to be met. There is a variance request with this subdivision. And it's a request for variance from AMC 2180-300D Design Standards Lot Dimensions. There are 4 standards that are required for a variance to be granted. I'll go through each standard. Standard number 1, staff finds this standard to be met. There are special conditions that exist in the property that are unique. Topography and presence of wetlands dictate the location of the roadway. Strict application of the subdivision regulations would require the cul-de-sac to be extended, which in turn would exceed the maximum allowable length of a cul-de-sac in the R6 district, which would in turn require a variance. Standard number 2, staff finds this standard to be met. The granting of this variance would not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the area. This variance will provide for a larger lot and negates the need to extend the cul-de-sac beyond what is permitted by the subdivision regulations. Standard number 3, staff finds this standard to be met. Granting of the requested variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. The variance requested would result in a lot width to depth ratio of approximately 3.46 to 1. This is a minimal variance when considering the unique character of the property to include the slopes and the wetlands. Standard number 4, staff finds this standard to be met. Undue hardship would result from, for the petitioner from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. Strict compliance would create a substantial economic impact to the petitioner, and that the roadway would need to be extended further, which would provide no benefit to the surrounding properties. With that being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the request for variance from AMC 2180-300D, approval of the cluster housing site plan, and approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions on 10, 11, and 12 of your staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Story.
Through the chair, staff, I just wanted to clarify for the approval of the variances just for the proposed lot 7, so it just affects the one lot.
Through the chair, Mr. Story, yes, you are correct. It's just the one lot.
Are there any other questions of staff? Hearing and seeing none, the public hearing is open, or the hearing is open to the public. May we have the petitioner or the petitioner's representative to give us a presentation? Please state your name for the record and let us know if you'd like to reserve time for rebuttal.
Hello, my name is Andre Spinelli. I represent Spinell Homes, or Spinvest. We're developing it as a cluster plat in order to preserve the wetlands. It's something that I heard, well, I read several times throughout the Hillside District Plan, and then I heard from the community that I talked to on the hillside as well. I don't have anything else to say. I'll reserve my time.
One moment. Are there any questions of the petitioner? Thank you. You have 9 minutes and 42 seconds for rebuttal. And the hearing is now open to public testimony. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to testify tonight?
Good evening. My name is James Michael Franger, Franger. I live at street address 3800 Clio Avenue. The lot is Woodhaven Subdivision Addition Number 1. I've lived there for the last 12 years. This lot is directly across from the southwest corner of this proposed development. I have several concerns regarding the proposed development. First, the western and southern halves of this area are extremely wet, which makes drainage in this area particularly sensitive. Furrow Creek runs through the southern half of the development, not in a discrete channel, but meandering through the area in several channels. Contributing to the flow of normal and stormwater runoff in this area is a major culvert crossing under Elmore Road. as well as a 36-inch culvert recently installed as part of the drainage improvements at Huffman Elementary School. This culvert alone has increased greatly the surface flow of water across the proposed development on the south half. How much more runoff will be added to the area by clearing and development on this tract? How will runoff from spring breakup be handled? Without a doubt, the runoff will be increased and more concentrated, especially to the south and west of this tract. Furthermore, storm runoff and drainage issues are known to exist in the area and have required action by various municipal departments in the past. I refer to the April 11, 2013 memo from Sean Dooley to Dave Whitfield. In that memo, it was recommended that more detailed stormwater investigation and management by this subdivision developer is required. I agree. My understanding is that a jurisdictional determination of the wetlands on this tract has not been done. When will this be done? What effect will this have on the proposed subdivision design? Apparently, percolation tests have not been completed either to confirm the suitability of the proposal. This area is known for having clay soil with limited percolation. In general, it appears that much more work needs to be done to determine how or if this area can be developed as a subdivision. As a landowner in the area that will be directly affected by the proposed development, what contingencies will be put in place to address flooding and damage to adjacent properties that may occur when drainage patterns are altered in this area by this proposed development? Basically, drainage is a concern here, and where I live, there's not much difference in elevation from the north half of Clio, which is on this proposed development, and the south half where I am, which means any increased drainage in this area that's going to come flowing down into the southwest corner of the development is going to be right across from me, and I just don't want it ending up in my front yard.
Thank you. Are there any are there any questions? Mr. Fuller.
Yes, Mr. Franger. Have you had any flooding in the past?
I've got a culvert that runs under Clio Avenue, which is right in front of me, that freezes every winter. And if it's not thawed in a timely manner, yes, I have had flooding in my yard. And so it's just an indication of how sensitive the drainage is in this area.
Yeah. So it currently already exists then?
Excuse me?
The situation currently already exists.
Well, if that culvert isn't thawed, I have to call the city every year. They came out last week and opened it up for me. I had water backing up at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Question from Mr. Story.
Not a question, just Mr. Franger. It appears in the packet here that there's a substantial amount of information that still needs to be collected and issues that need to be resolved. Under number 7, providing permanent stormwater treatment measures and subdivision drainage design, that's a requirement for the approval of the plat. Also providing to private development a groundwater hydrology analysis of the subject area to determine the seasonal high groundwater table elevations to resolve the need for footing drains and stub outs. And then on number 14, it's requirement to provide to private development a comprehensive site grading and drainage plan to resolve the need for drainage easements and drainage improvements, and to demonstrate that all post-development drainage patterns will not adversely impact adjacent properties or right-of-ways, and to include a suitable outfall. So there's provisions within the approval of the plat to take care of the drainage from what I see in the packets that's been provided to us.
Fine, if that work gets done. I mean, but you know as well as I do that you've got flooding problems around town on subdivisions that have been improved in the past, so I'm expressing my concerns here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Anybody else wishing to testify? Anybody else at all? Yes.
My name is Cordell Lucia. Last name is Lucia. I live right down the street. actually on the corner of Clio and Avion. The address is 11941 Avion. And I have the same concerns. We just went through the whole process and got permitting, and I'm in the process of building a shop. And as it was explained, the property does slope to the west, and we are, I don't know the distance, but we are below that property. Furrow Creek does run down the wetlands right on the north edge of my property, and you'd be welcome to walk out there right now. And the driveway to the shop is flooded. There's not proper drainage, hasn't been dealt with on below that property as it crosses Avion. And so if this is going to increase that, it's just going to make the problem worse for me. And, you know, the subdivision is up above me, and so how far down is that going to, their responsibility going to extend? Because the problem already exists where I am. And if they develop that more, if it's not seen all the way through, all the way down to where it is finally drained out to wherever, you know, it's going to impact me greatly. So I just wanted to express my concern, have it be noted.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Lucia? I have a comment. The Design Criteria Manual, Chapter 2, will require the developer not to increase the runoff by more than 5% of the current runoff today. But that doesn't mean that it will be concentrated and directed at your property. That the municipality is not going to allow that.
Okay, so how does that get tracked from right now until when they're done?
Well, before the final plat is approved, that has to go through project management and engineering, and the developer is going to have to demonstrate to project management and engineering that they have an adequate drainage plan. And
Okay.
That's going to be a requirement of this plat.
Okay, and is it possible to get one of those packets? There wasn't one available for me up here.
I think the answer is yes.
Oh, perfect.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify? Anyone at all? Mr. Spinelli, would you like to use any of your time, your rebuttal time? You have 9 minutes and 42 seconds remaining.
Sure. To address a couple of the concerns I heard, the property has been perk tested, all the lots. That's a preliminary platting requirement. Several of the soils are very tight on several of the lots, and we expect to use advanced wastewater treatment systems. With regards to the wetlands delineation, there has been 2 wetlands delineations on the property. I purchased the property with an existing wetlands delineation. The standards had changed. We had a second delineation performed last June, and that is why we decided to plat it in the manner we did, was to preserve the wetlands that have been delineated. Regarding the drainage issues, I've heard it over and over again. Our calculations, our civil engineering is in the works. It's not finalized yet. From my understanding of it, preserving the amount of wetlands that we are in the location that we are, most of the drainage will be directed to the wetlands. The open space tracts are larger than the actual wetlands themselves, and we feel that they will be able to contain a lot of the water on site until Furrow Creek can take it away.
Thank you. Are there Are there any questions of the petitioner? Mr. Edmondson.
Through the chair, Mr. Spinelli, I just want to confirm the wetlands that's delineated on our plat map is from the most current delineation that you had done? Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions of the petitioner? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
The public hearing portion of this meeting is closed. The matter now rests with the board. Are there any questions of staff? May I have a positive motion? Mr. Walker, would you make your motion, please?
As to case S119891, Woodhaven subdivision, I move to approve the request for variance from AMC 2180 330D. The design standards, lot dimensions, the width of the lot shall be at least 1/30 the depth of the lot for proposed lot 7.
Thank you. And Ms. Enoch seconds. Mr. Walker, would you speak to your motion, please?
Well, I concur with the meet the design standards. I also think that the variance is not substantial and would not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the other property in the area. Also, I don't know that the small change or difference in size would affect the hydrology at all, and shouldn't be a factor. I move to approve on case number S119891, Woodhaven subdivision, the request for variance from AMC 2180 300D. The design standards, lot dimensions, the width of the lot shall be at least 1/3 the depth of the lot for proposed lot 7.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Are there any additional findings? Mr. Cole.
The findings that I would make are that the standards for whether or not a variance request should be granted are spelled out at pages 9 and 10, including whether there are special circumstances or conditions affecting the property, which I find to be true and met. Number 2, the granting of the variance will not be detrimental as indicated. And number 3, that the variance will have the effect of will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the comprehensive plan. And 4, that it appears that an undue hardship would result from the undue and strict compliance. And I find that based not only upon the information provided in the package, but the testimony we've received today.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Are there any other comments? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, this motion passes. I would like to request a motion for the approval of the cluster housing site plan. Mr. Cole.
I would move in the case of S11989-1 Woodhaven subdivision, I would move for the approval of the cluster housing site plan.
Thank you. And Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Cole, would you speak to your motion, please?
Based on the testimony we've received today, this appears to be a fairly unique property with drainage and water problems that require the approval of the cluster housing plan. The staff has done an excellent job of preparing the information on pages 8 through 9 of our packet on the elements that are required to be met for a cluster housing site plan. based on the information that we've received today in this package, I believe those have been met, and will be voting in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion? Any additional findings? I, too, intend to support this motion, and I want to reiterate that the work that that staff has provided on pages 8 and 9 appears to demonstrate that this has met all of the requirements for the cluster housing design. Is there any other comments? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. And I would request, or I do request, a motion for approval of the plat for 18 months with subject to conditions, please. Mr. Cole?
In the case of S-11989-1 Woodhaven subdivision, I would move for the approval of the plat for 18 months subject to conditions 1 through 19 on pages 10, 11, and 12 of our packet. I'm happy to read those, but if necessary, but don't think so in this case.
Thank you. And Mr. Edmondson seconds the motion. I would like to request that a clarification on at the bottom of page number 11 is item 15, and then on page 12, the next item is 19, and that should be 16.
Yes. So my motion would be to approve the plat for 18 months subject to conditions 1 through 15, and instead of 19, that should be marked out and say 16.
Thank you very much. Just a clarification. Mr. Cole, will you speak to your motion, please?
Well, I intend to vote in favor of this. I've listened to the people that have spoken today. I think I obviously understand their concerns. I'm always interested in what people have to say, particularly the people that live in the area. But our role on the board is to make sure that the necessary conditions are in place to ensure that those types of drainage issues are addressed. It appears to me that the conditions that have been set forth in the department's recommendation, which have been noted by several of the members, do adequately address the drainage issue. And the package itself does not contain really much in the way of criticism or comments other than that. It does look like it's a development of a challenging area, and these conditions all appear to address and those development issues. So I'll be voting in favor of it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion or findings?
I would note that there's already water drainage problems in the area. Testimony was that there are issues, and that doing something is going to have a better chance of alleviating some of those than doing nothing. And so I would vote in favor of the plat.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion? Mr. Abel, are you waving or just? Well, good evening. I do have a comment also. I'm going to support this. And I just want to reiterate that several members of the public did discuss drainage problems. There is a drainage problem that exists. And item number 7 of the conditions providing permanent stormwater treatment measures in the subdivision is a drainage design is a requirement that we are requiring of this plat that will address the drainage, and also providing to private development, number 13, an erosion and sediment control plan, and number 14, providing to private development a comprehensive site grading and drainage plan to resolve the need for drainage easements and drainage improvements, and to demonstrate that all post-development drainage patterns will not adversely impact adjacent properties or rights-of-way, and to include a suitable outfall. So I believe that the concerns that were raised tonight about drainage are addressed in this plat, and that this matter will now require project management and private development to address this. And there is also a question about the jurisdictional wetland or jurisdictional determination of wetlands, and we heard from the developer tonight that that has been done, and it's also a condition of the plat, item number 11. So I too will be supporting this plat. Are there any other comments or discussion? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, this motion passes. Thank you. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions as governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the Board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per 21.11.503, or an appeal of the Board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. The next case is case number S11990-1, Tudor Center subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium is seeking to subdivide their property from one tract into 2 tracts in order to build a future structured parking garage. This preliminary plat doesn't qualify for the abbreviated process because of the zoning. The conditions of approval are pretty standard. There's just a few drafting changes suggested in the conditions of approval. On pages 4 and 5, conditions 1 through 10, the department recommends approval subject to those conditions, and would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? The public hearing is now open. May we have the petitioner's representative? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Tanya Hickok, Hickok, with Dowell HKM. I'd like to reserve 2 minutes. With me tonight are representatives of the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. The parcel is actually owned by the Indian Health Service, and ANTHC will be acquiring the parcel, the western parcel, in the future. The existing property is used for the Centers for Disease Control. It occupies approximately 20% of the site. The remaining western portion of the site is surface parking for employees. So ANTHC will be acquiring the western portion, and they are currently planning parking structure design plans with their design team and a future patient housing that'll be located even further west of the parking structure. We have reviewed the packet, and we don't have any major concerns. The only clarification we'd like to make is on condition number 3. It does state that we need to resolve the access easements with fire and traffic, and we just wanted to let you know that we have been coordinating with fire and traffic and our design team, and it looks that we'll actually need to separate the 2 easements, the common access easement as well as the fire truck access easement. The reason being due to the future nature of the parking structure, the multiple phases, we'd like to have the common access easement dedicated on the face of the plat and then have the fire truck access easement by document. So that's the only clarification on that. Otherwise, the way it's written is actually just fine. We just wanted to make a clarification of how we would be resolving that condition of approval. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. You have 6 minutes and 12 seconds for rebuttal. Are there any questions of the petitioner's representative? This is your chance. Mr. Cage.
Yes. Have you spoken to the municipal staff about your concerns regarding?
Yes, we have.
And through the chair to the staff, any issue with? Do we look to change this or modify this a recommendation?
Through the chair, the solution that Ms. Hickok proposed of separating out the 2 easements and doing the emergency, the fire truck access by document and the common driveway dedicating that on the plat is the best way to do it. And the wording of the condition is interpreted to give them flexibility to do just that. It's just fine.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? This is your opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
The public hearing portion of this meeting is closed. The matter now rests with the board. Oops. Whoa. We really got going faster, didn't we? Is there any testimony from the public? Anyone wishing to testify before I close the hearing? Anyone at all? This is my mistake, and this is your chance. Hearing and seeing none, would you like to use any of your time for rebuttal? Ms. Hickok waves no. The public hearing is now closed, and the matter rests with the board. Is there any questions of staff? May I have a positive motion in this case, please? Mr. Keynes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In case S11990-1, the Tudor Center subdivision, I move to approve the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 10 in our staff packet on pages 4 and 5.
Thank you. And Mr. Walker seconds. Mr. Keynes, would you speak to your motion, please?
Sure. Thank you. It appears that these conditions are in compliance and at least address some of the agency's concerns, as well as the petitioners, as well as supported by the staff's report and findings in our packet. I tend to vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Are there any discussion? Any questions? Any additional findings? I too will be supporting this motion, and the reason I will support this is this looks like a very clear-cut case. It's fairly simple, and the petitioner has addressed a clarification for item number 3, resolved with the fire plan review and traffic. and we've confirmed with staff that that is appropriate, and all the condition, everything appears to be met that needs to be done. So, is there one last chance for comments, questions? Are there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, this motion passes. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions as governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the Board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503 or appeal of the Board's final appealable decisions per AMC 21.30. Are there any appearance requests for tonight? No. Are there any other business that is scheduled for tonight? No. Are there persons to be heard? And reports, are there committee or secretary reports? There is a chair report that I would like to provide. On April 13th, there was a 21st Century Planning Commissioners presentation, and this was an all-day presentation starting at 6 o'clock on Saturday morning. And I want to summarize some of the results because I believe these are really relevant to the board. Decisions are based on laws and regulations. So this educational opportunity was put on by the APA, which is the American Planning Association. It was well done. And so they're talking about more planning and zoning, but it would apply to us as well. And this is your opportunity to learn from a summary without having to spend 8 hours to hear all of this. I mean, you should celebrate that you saved 8 hours. Decisions are based on laws and regulations, and we want to make sure that the regulations are considered in our decisions. And we want to apply rules and regulations to our decisions. And I would give an example of that as how we proceeded tonight was excellent. We want to explain the procedures, which is what I read at the beginning of the meetings. And every discussion must go through the chair. And I think I'm going to say this about 3 or 4 times, not because of what we do or don't do, but because of the presentation that was very clear, or they wanted to make it very clear that the chairman is a person responsible for controlling the meeting, so controlling the audience, controlling the board, controlling the staff. So all the conversations go through the chair. Yes. Through the chair.
I would also point out that when you go through the chair, he can also identify the speaker for the audio record, which is really important too.
And one of the chair's responsibilities is to keep decorum. Again, everything goes through the chair. We want to welcome the public to our meetings, and we are oftentimes people who come to these meetings it's their first time to ever participate in a civil event, and we on the board are their first impression of what the city government is like. So we are actually not only representing the city, but we are making a big impression to a lot of people who are here. and are nervous even in the process. Our end goal is that we provide an ethical, defensible decisions. We want to explain the proceedings in the process, and we want to explain the limits of our authority. And at many of these meetings, we have done exactly that when people are asking us about zoning uses, and that's not our authority. I'm looking at you too often. I think it's not personal. You're just on my right-hand side, and it's more convenient. Allow evidence through the chair, and the chair is the moderator. Explain what is going to happen, and we are doing that in our process. Explain what has happened, and we are doing that in our findings. And an example is we heard blank, 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 and we heard from the neighbors, and the results of that are that, in this case, the conditions of the plat address those concerns. Tonight, that was the result. What goes into the written record? Evidence. Summarize. We want to summarize the evidence and the findings of fact. So these are really important. And some of the presenters for the APA were attorneys who oftentimes represent and defend municipalities and cities. So they're asking us, if they were defending us, they want evidence and findings of fact in the record. And so when we hear public testimony, we need to, as a board, we need to summarize the public's testimony to get that into our findings as we're making our decisions. We want consistency with the plans, consistency with the subdivision regulations. We want to relate our findings back to the evidence that was presented, and that is the heart of the decision. If we don't know the regulations, we want to seek advice, and we can seek advice from the staff. Trust me, I'm going fast, even if it seems slow. We want to be efficient and formal, and this hearing is as much for the citizens and the public as it is for anybody. So we want to keep this a user-friendly process. We want to follow legal due process and apply the legal due process. If we are considering action that impacts property, we must follow due process. And our job is to hear evidence to determine whether the standards are met. Just some basics. We want to project an image of serious business. We want to remember that we are the first impression for the public, and we want to create trust and credibility with the public. We want to start off on the right foot. We are the image of the government, so consider, and one thing they discussed, which is a bit out of our control, except is we want to consider the layout of the room. And I'd like the American flag closer to me in the future if we could, to the center of the room. I've considered this. There's two stages in what we're doing, and the first one is the fact-finding and then the deliberation. And we want to tell the audience what we need for facts. And we want to remember that opinions can only come from experts, and the facts can come from the public. And so we need to, as far as the judicial record, we need to be careful in that we're not acting on opinions from non-experts, because that won't hold up in court. So we need to, if we're getting opinions like, I think this is going to flood, would be an example, then we need to ask for facts on why they are forming that opinion and not base our decisions on the opinion. For due process, we want to announce the procedures as part of the due process, and we're doing that. No one speaks who is not recognized by the chair. In full disclosure is last minute information that comes in. This is really important, and we've discussed this before. It's not fair to everyone because the audience doesn't get to see it and doesn't get to prepare for it. We have the option to table new information and postpone a hearing, or accept it and act on it. And the word of caution is if we do act on the new information and we do not completely read it because it's at the last minute, we haven't had time to digest it, then we may lose an appeal process because of that. So we need to really seriously consider what we're going to do with information that's laid on the table at the last minute. We are responsible for the information being part of the record if we accept it. So we can table that hearing for the next meeting, and so we have time to review the information. Okay. Findings of fact is not based on compassion. The burden of proof is on the applicant. We don't have to believe anything we hear. We can state that we believe one expert is more credible than another expert. We can state that we don't believe some of the testimony we hear is credible. So we have that ability to be the judge. You can be the judge of that. And what are the bodies of facts? The staff report is the first place to start for findings of fact. We want to explain why we are making our decisions and what the reason is for the decisions. We are a quasi-judicial process in applying decisions, and a quasi-jurisdictional process is about rules that are already adopted. We are applying regulations. We are acting like a court. For example, a lower tribunal. We are the judges. We are the finder of facts. Some of you just got promoted. One of the things that was brought up is that we could put in the record is, are the notices done correctly? So we could review this in the whoops. And we would want to confirm this in the record. Yes, Mr. Fuller. Yes.
Well, in your last little explanation there, constitutionally, aren't we looking to protect the rights of the individual and the property owner as opposed to mob rule?
Let me.
I mean, I ask you where our position, being the moderator, and somewhat in a judicial fashion, is to protect the individual and private property rights over just somebody's opinion or group think. You know, we're already here, so we got ours. Forget them.
Mr. Fuller, I will attempt to, as a non-attorney, attempt to address your question. I'm not going to talk about the Constitution. However, to be as direct as I can, our task here is to represent the public's interest. It's also to apply the regulations that are in the code properly to make sure that those regulations are being met. And we are not to be swayed by let's say we have an overwhelming amount of opinions and opposition. We are not here to listen or to make our decisions based on those opinions. We are here to make sure that the facts of the matter comply with the regulations. Does that? So do the attorneys who gave the presentation. Okay. We do have the right to cross-examine. We have the right to cross-examine experts, and the public has the right to cross-examine. And so if a member of the public in their 3 minutes wishes to ask a question of an expert or of the staff, then they have that right. So that's something that I was unaware of. No, I don't think we've ever made it clear that they have a right to ask staff questions. Oh, it's not usually done, but from my new learnings, the public does have that right if they wish to exercise it. The opponents have the opportunity to rebut any of the experts, including the staff, but it must be done through the chair. And again, we have time limits on this. Our vote is not a popular vote. I just discussed that. Our vote is based on evidence. So if there's 122 people, it's an arbitrary number I picked, who are opposing something, but they don't have the facts, we are not here to address a popularity contest. We are here to apply the facts of the case to the regulations and our understanding of the evidence. If I go really fast, we'll be done. Okay. Formal rules do not apply. Hearsay is allowed, and there is time to review lengthy documents. The petitions are not relevant. They are not evidence. So when people sign petitions in opposition or in favor, those petitions are not relevant unless they are evidence. Board deliberations must be competent. We have to find substantial evidence. The conditions must be reasonable. There must be a nexus between the regulations and the conditions. Takings. Private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. And this is to the Constitution, this is a Fifth Amendment right. And with respect to variances and departure from the standards, land is not uniform, so these variances get applied differently for each piece of land, and we want to state the reasons for the variance. And that concludes the chair's report. Are there any comments? Discussion? Are there any board member comments in general? I would like to have, yes, Mr. Cole.
Through the chair, we appreciate the chairman's report.
Thank you. And now I would like to entertain a motion for adjournment. Mr. Cange and Mr. Edmondson seconds, and the hearing is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.